Welcome to the Fret Frontier. Today we're going to take a look at setting up a ukulele so it's comfortable to play. This is an inexpensive ukulele that I got off of Amazon. The action is a little bit high. Places I want to take a look at on this ukulele will be the saddle, the nut, and also the frets themselves. If these bars are sharp, I'll want to make those a little bit smoother. Tools I'll need to use to do this setup include a string winder. When I'm working on the saddle, I'm going to want a saddle sander to hold on to it. This particular one came with a flat board to keep the saddle straight while I'm sanding it, but if you need something a little more coarse, you might want your own sandpaper. That will take care of the work we'll do down here. When we're working on the nut, we're going to need some files for something like this. A small set of files like this will suffice. I'll have links to all these at the bottom. When we're looking at the frets on the side, we're going to want a file and then some micro sanders. We'll also need some miscellaneous tools. Long nose pliers will come in handy. And then just to protect the instrument in various places, we'll use a little bit of masking tape. First thing we want to do is get some numbers to work with. How far down do we want to bring our string action? This is where the action gauge will come in handy. We want to take a look at the height. You can use either set of numbers. For this demonstration, I'll be using the set of numbers down at the bottom of the scale. I'll put this up against my 12th fret, and I already know that I like my action to be down at 2.75, and on this instrument I am up at 3.25, so that's a little high, so that's where my target is, 2.75. So I'm going to want to lower this nut to get there. And then over here, we'll take a look at how high my strings are. Generally, I like about a 0.75 at the nut, and I'm just a little bit over that, so I'm going to want to sand this file down here. But I will start first with my action on the saddle. When I'm working with the saddle on my ukulele, first thing I want to do is check and make sure I've got some place I can work with to bring the saddle down, and in this case I do. On some of the ukuleles that you'll purchase, or any stringed instrument actually, if you don't have enough room here on this piece of plastic to bring it down, if it's already down as far as it can go, then you may need to adjust the action using whatever other options are available to you. In this particular case, this instrument has a truss rod, so I could bend the neck back this way if I needed to. In this case, this is just out of the factory, a little high. I can see that I've got room here on the bridge to sand down some of this material so that the strings will be a little bit lower. So what I'm going to start by doing is loosening the strings. I don't want to take them off. I don't want to put new strings on. I just want to make it a little more comfortable to play. So I'm going to do what I need to do to keep the strings on, and that will start with just loosening these strings, and I'm going to start doing that with my play your string. Just listen, make sure you're going in the right direction. You'll hear that string going down rather than up, because you don't want to break your strings making them too tight. So I'll go ahead and do that for all of my strings. Once the strings are loose enough so that you can start working on this bridge, what we want to do is just grab it and slide it out. Long nose pliers will help with this depending on how snug the saddle is in this little piece of wood here, so in our bridge. So what we're going to do is just grab a hold of this particular saddle, and again we're doing this way because we don't want to take the strings off. We're not changing them, and we have plenty of room. These strings have been put on with lots and lots of extra string up here at the top, so we're not going to have a problem. We'll just pull this up. Almost. Okay, I've got it up on the top here now of my bridge. I don't know if you can see that there. I've scooched it over, and now I'm just going to pop it over to the side. just slide it right off there, and now it's just sitting on my instrument. And one other thing I'm going to want to do is make a little pencil mark here to remember which way to put it back in, so that I know that the mark I put with the pencil mark on it is going to be pointing towards my first string. And in this particular case, I want to make sure I put it in the same way I took it out, because this is one of these compensated bridges. So I want to take advantage of that nice work that they did for me to get better intonation on my strings when it's in there. Now I have the piece of material that I want to work on out of the ukulele. This will be the piece of material that I slide into this saddle and nut sander to hold it steady. And make sure that it's nice and straight. You can eyeball it. This won't go any lower than these little tracks that you have on the side here. And you can adjust these tracks with these spinners on the side if you want to raise them a little bit, to make sure you take off just a little bit of material at a time. So get that straight. And then I'm just going to put this on my sander and start running it back and forth till I've removed a little bit of the material. Now, one thing you can do to make sure you've gotten rid of some material is, once again, take a pencil and run the pencil down the bottom here so that you can see that you have removed the pencil marking here and gotten it nice and straight. So I'll demonstrate that. We're taking the pencil, running it on the bottom here just to get some pencil markings all the way across. And we're going to cover this whole bottom of our piece of material. And then we will see that we went evenly. If you're running this back and forth on your sander, you pick it back up and you see you've got a pencil mark down here, but none over here. You know you're going at an angle, so that will allow you to correct whatever's going wrong and make sure that you're sanding evenly. And you can stop and do that every so often until you feel that you've sanded as far as you want to before you try it. Now remember, you want to go in a prudent manner with your sanding, because you can't put material back on. You can only take it off. So we don't want to have to put a shim in there to bring the saddle back up. We're just wanting to get it down. So just a little bit at a time, and then we'll put it back in and test it. Here we are back with our piece of material that's been sanded. We have our pencil mark here showing that this is the side we want to put towards this highest string here. And we're just going to slide this piece back in. You may or may not need to use your long nose pliers to get this in here. Looks like I can do it without. Okay, so it's back in, and now side to side I want to make sure I have the same amount sitting on each side. It looks pretty good. Now if you've popped it in and you're having a hard time sliding it, say it's really tight in there, one thing that I have used, I can mention to you here, is a chopstick. Just take a chopstick and push on the side that you're having a problem moving, and it'll just scooch it over for you a little bit. Now in my case it did that, and it's even better seated than I could see with the naked eye. So I have it in the exact right place, totally even here. Okay. Next we're going to take a look at how to work on the fret. Once you've tuned back up, you're happy with where the action is on your 12th fret, we want to come over, we want to make the strings loose again and move them over to start working on your nut. So to make sure that we have the nut coming down to the distance that we want, first of all we take our string action gauge, take a look at how far we got to go. So yep, I'm at about 1 here and I want to be at 0.75. One of the things that I can do to make sure that I don't go too low is use a spacer. So I will show you what a spacer looks like. So a collection of spacers are just these metal tabs. And we want to take a collection of these and use them to make sure that we do not go too far when we are sanding. So a good way to gauge this is to take a single spacer, slide it under there, and see how close you're coming in terms of that first fret bar that you see there. You never want to be lower than your fret bar or else it'll cause some buzzing. So actually that looks pretty good. I'm going to give myself a little bit of extra leeway though, just in case. So and I'm going to take another really skinny one I can find, just to give me a little extra security that I'm not going to go too low and end up with some buzzing. So if I put this one under here, take a look at what I got. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm definitely, this one I can actually slide over the fret, so I know I'm going to have some space. So now what I'm going to do is move the strings over out of the way one by one. So I've moved that first string out of the way. I have that nut space open. This is where I take these little files, and I'm going to find one that looks like it fits in this fret pretty good. I don't want it to widen the fret. I don't want to make that space bigger. I want to make sure there's enough room for the strings. I'm going to just test some of these out, laying it in there. This is going to be a pretty narrow one because this is a fairly thin string. And this looks pretty good. I like that one. And again, you're doing this just to make sure that you don't make that too wide and then the string has too much play in it. If you make it too narrow, then what will happen is the string will get caught in there. When you're trying to tune it, it's going to be pinched, and then you'll be turning the string and it won't really be moving, and eventually it could cause it to break because you're just tightening this little top part here. So we want to make sure that we've got something working there that looks good to us. I'm going to slide our spacer back in and then just start sanding. Now you would think that these don't really look like they would do anything, but they actually do remove some material. And remember, you got your spacer there, so you're not going to go too low. So we want to keep going till we're even with the spacer. We want to round it out just a little bit. We're rounding it out just a little bit there. Okay, that looks good. And then you do that for each one of the strings. Before I tuned it all the way up, one more thing I wanted to show. If you have sharp frets, places where you feel that when you run your finger over it, it's uncomfortable, it's easy to adjust those. You just need a fret file. In this case, this is the Stewart McDonald 1175, just a small file so that you can get some good definition here. And you bring the file over one side of the fret this way, other side of the fret bar this way, and then just across the top of the fret bar. And you can do that for each one of these all the way across just to make sure they're comfortable. You could do it on both sides of the neck, depending on how it feels. Generally, this is where your finger's really running, so this is where you'll feel it. And then after you have done each one of the frets, take a little piece of masking tape. You're just going to slide it here just for safety's sake. Don't really need this, but if this is the first time that you're doing this, you might. You feel more comfortable having it there. So we put it there. Then we're going to take one of these micro sanders, and you can do this with any kind of sanding tool that you have. These are a little easier to control because they're flat, a little bit stiff, and then you're just going to run it up and down across the frets just very gently, and you got that sandpaper there to protect the wood. And you're just making sure these are all even and they're polished a little bit, they feel smooth. You can do the same thing over here in this little area. Readjust your piece of tape so that you're not going to hit any part of the wood on the guitar. Run that over back and forth a few times, and it doesn't really take very much. You'll feel a difference immediately, and if it gets sharp again, or once you string it up it still feels like it's sharp, you'll go to that place where it is sharp, just pull the string out of the way with your finger so that you got some space, and do that process again, one side, then the other side, then the top, and just buff it a little bit and you're done. Okay, our last step is to make sure we got final tuning, a little low there. Okay. there. Okay. Okay, now I have actions comfortable for me. I'm not getting all those lines in my fingers. I'm not feeling all this extra tension in here when I want to bar anything, any place. So I'm happy with this, and it took me a couple tries to get here. As you saw, we take the nut out, go a little bit at a time, test it out, see if we're in the right place, and then you're always checking to know if you're at the right place. Bringing your gauge over here if you know where you're going. And I have other ukuleles, so I use this same setup for ukuleles when I add a new one into my collection. And you can learn how to do this getting a less expensive or very inexpensive ukulele on Amazon for the purposes of just practicing to do your setup. It's really worth it. Gives you a lot of comfort in working with your instruments so that all of them perform the way that you want to, and they're always a joy to play. Hope you got something out of this, and thank you so much for joining me.